We've made this video to help schools and families with the return to school for our children. We know that our children often find returning to school tricky after the long summer holidays anyway, but given the massive changes with the global pandemic and all the uncertainty, we thought it might be helpful for teachers and families to have a bit of an idea of how PACE might help children settle better.
Wanted to consider how PACE may be applied in this context. And we also wanted to think about significant adults in the child's world, both in their home environments, but also within the school communities that they're living in, and that transition, as Ronnie shared.
Just a little reminder of what PACE is really. That we mean playfulness, acceptance, curiosity, and empathy. Obviously, that was developed by Dan Hughes, but as Ronnie mentioned before, it's a really useful thing for us to use in terms of thinking of some of the challenges that children are going to face and our responses to those children.
With playfulness, Ronnie and Anne-Marie and I have talked a lot about thinking about a place where you can meet your child in a less defensive and resistant part of their brain. And play is such an important way of connecting and communicating with our children and enabling them to meet at a point where you can learn about what their inner worries might be. And it's a way of kind of serve and return and thinking about those experiences in a much more quicker way than verbal communication, because you hit at the heart of those inner worries a child might be experiencing.
And it's a really important. It's really important for healthy brain development, play, and it really helps, like Claire said. It really helps children process their learning and the world around them, and particularly with all the changes that are going on at the moment. Anything wrapped up in play is really going to have a much stronger chance of being heard really by the child. And it's great for creating emotional safety and providing those protective factors for later mental health as well. And what we know really, in terms of thinking about defensiveness and that part of the brain, we know that if you're feeling joy, if you're experiencing fun, then it's much, much more difficult to remain defensive and be guarded. So it just helps us all stay open and engaged, and that's really what we want in terms of children kind of learning about the new normals that are going to be starting to come around in September when they start back at school again.
And some of the things that we're talking about together as a staff group was thinking about how you can give children chances to play and rehearse how it might be going back to school. So whether it's pretending as part of that playfulness at home with your children, packing the lunch bags, getting uniform on, or whatever the uniform, because it might be non-uniform that's needed, but getting them used to practicing, because we have to be really careful we don't assume that they will remember what school and going to and all those routines and structures will be, because they will be very different and they might need to have lots of practice and rehearse. So that playfulness in doing that could be a really good way. Another way that we talked about was maybe having puppets or story time, so that in the run-up to them going back into school and managing that really significant transition, you can give them chances to really play together with you. And it gives you, again, a little chance to do some play scripts with them about how that might feel, what their worries are, and prepare them for what it'll be to go back to school and be in those with their teachers and peers.
Yeah. And many schools have been doing videos using like the class teddy bear and, to look at the layout of the school, and even doing things like doing songs and rhymes about hand washing, and any of those things that, again, are wrapped up in play will really, really help kind of cement them in the child's brain in terms of learning and kind of preparing them and just getting them to feel safe about those changes.
And sometimes play is about your tone as well. So it's just keeping your language light, giving that message that you can manage this. So even if you're not actually involved in play, having a playful tone while you're talking about school will really help your children feel that it's not something that you're overly worried about, and therefore it's not something that they need to be overly worried about.
And also it might be, and depending on everybody who's going into different schools, obviously across all these different regions, but it is thinking about those communications with teaching staff about how they're going to integrate play, as Anne-Marie was saying, about getting playfulness both in the home and in the school spheres to help children to have, whether it's just in their bubble of play in the playground or whether it's in arts, creative arts within the school environment, how they can have that playfulness to give that expression of those inner worries and those inner fears that might be happening for them. It's really important.
Okay. So when we talk about acceptance, we're really thinking about accepting the child's worries, thoughts, feelings without kind of evaluation or judgment, or trying to jump in to kind of fix or reassure them. And that really is important, no matter how tiny or insignificant or illogical they might seem to us. For them, they're very real and they can be very big. And I think there's often a huge temptation as adults. We naturally kind of want to jump in and we want to fix those things. We want to find a solution straight away. But what's really important is that the child feels really heard and listened to begin with, because we can only kind of start to explore some of those solutions once they really feel that. Otherwise, sometimes we can be just kind of sticking a plaster on without really kind of looking at what lies beneath it, really. So that's kind of modelling again with our language and our emotional tone that we use, a bit like Ronnie mentioned before. It's kind of that very light tone, and giving that message really that we're not overwhelmed by whatever it is that the child's sharing with us.
And actually, if that child is sharing something very small, that it may be that they're testing the waters to see how you'll manage it. So the more accepting you are of those things and taking them seriously for the child, the more you're building a relationship with that child for them to start to talk to you about bigger things in the future.
Yeah. And I think as well, that assumption, try not to assume that your child may be managing the transition from home to school really well. It might be that they're real internalisers and you will know them far better than anybody else, so you'll be able to judge that and understand that. But it is really important to not make an assumption that they're doing really well seemingly on the surface, because as we're acknowledging, underneath there might be lots of worries that are just not manifesting on the outside.
Yeah. And I think there's lots of children that show that in school, that which can be quite deceiving really as a teacher, because you think that they're managing really well, but actually as soon as they come outside and they kind of hit the school gates, they kind of become undone again, and it kind of overspills out when they're at home. So yeah, it's really important, isn't it, to kind of name out loud those general worries so that they're normalised for those children that might not be able to voice them while they're in school.
And I think that's the challenge for school staff, isn't it? Is having that kind of attachment, understanding, and the trauma history that might be alongside for a child, understanding that in each individual child that's in their school. It's really tough, and we're recognising that, but it is going to be really important to have that attachment style understanding and be trauma informed.
Yeah. And just by talking about them and normalises them, even if the child doesn't voice them, it's just giving them that chance really of having that feeling of safety and acceptance in a very non-direct way that they might not be able to manage if it's too direct. But actually, if you're just naming it generally in the class, that can be quite helpful as well for the child. I think we've also talked about, haven't we, as well, that just as adults, we kind of need to accept as well that the child might need lots of repetition at the moment, which can be quite hard for us to keep constantly reminding, but the child really needs it. And I think it's just important to remember that there will be lots of triggers to past traumas as well through this, and a lot of uncertainty that can then have an impact on a child's capacity to remember things. So for some children that can be really difficult, so it's just kind of being mindful of that we will need to repeat things quite often, and actually the more the better. And actually if you sew that in with play, then that's great, isn't it? It's great ways to remember new things, the rhymes, the songs, the different routines. It's a really great way to kind of repeat that again and again.
And it's also helping them practice that remembering, because one of the things that might be happening in the next few months is lots of changes along the way. So the more we can help them learn to remember differences, the more they can manage those differences that might happen because rules change or people change as the next few months go on.
Yeah. And it's like you said, Ronnie, showing that you're not overwhelmed by it as an adult, so that they can feel safe in that, can't they? There's some safety there.
Yeah.
And it's verbal prompting as well, isn't it? It's that it's along, and sensory breaks and all the things that staff can do creatively to help the child have that chance to explore that serve and return repeated experience, but also to have that predictability kind of slowly built back in wherever possible. Really challenging, I know.
And this is really just a graphic that shows why it is so difficult for children who've had those very difficult early experiences to manage in school. It's not, however intentional it looks, they literally have less capacity in their top part of the learning part of their brain if the other parts aren't attended to first, because they're more important for their survival. So the play, the acceptance, the curiosity and empathy, what we're going to talk about, will all help those bottom parts of the second triangle stabilise and therefore increase the capacity to access the top part for academic learning. And that's actually true for lots of our children at the moment who will be going through all sorts of change and worry and anxiety, because the world is just such an uncertain place at the moment for everybody.
Yeah.
So curiosity is literally, as it says here, it's wondering out loud. It's giving children the words for their feelings. So it encourages them to understand their own feelings, but also to feel safe that you might have some kind of understanding of them as well. They won't be able to tell you or to tell themselves that something that's happened in their past is triggering all their fears or concerns in the present, because that's not how children work. They work in the here and now. But if we can make children feel understood and really heard, so not just paying lip service to it, but really hearing what they're saying to us, then their capacity to feel connected to somebody really helps to settle their brains and to calm their anxiety. And then you can start to think about what actually might help that child in the here and now, because you are standing with the child in what they're feeling in the here and now rather than jumping too far ahead.
And it just validates for them that you are really trying to be, like Ronnie's saying, alongside them, trying to understand them and to reaffirm that however big or small those worries are, they're unique and they're significant to that child. And you're on that journey with them. So that's really, really powerful for a child, particularly as they're so powerless in our society, just generally anyway. So to feel understood will be very, very important and valuable.
And it's really important, isn't it, to remember that if we get it wrong, we just say sorry. You know, that's really good modelling for them as well. They still get the feeling that we're doing our absolute best to try and understand them. And there's real power in that as well. So, you know, there's a lot of uncertainty around at the moment, so we will make mistakes and we will get things wrong, but that's really good modelling for our children as well, and if it actually leads to a more kind of empathic response to the child as well, so not being too hard on ourselves if we get it wrong.
Going back, like you say, Anne-Marie, going back and trying again, because we are just human and we're all trying to do our best.
Yeah. And staying curious with our own feelings about it and where things sit with us at the moment, because there's a lot of uncertainty with us as adults, you know. So making sure we stay aware of our own feelings within it.
Because there'll be yeah, absolutely. There'll be so many triggers for our own selves as well, for community, school community, and for our adopters, in terms of the feelings that be generating anxiety, uncertainty, and that loss. There'll be everyone's experience in COVID-19 is going to be very unique and particular, and there will be people who've lived through many bereavements within our communities as well, and all the triggers and resonance. So that awareness and curiosity of your own feelings is going to be really important, alongside trying to understand your child's as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so empathy. We've talked, haven't we, about actually the best way to learn about empathy is living it. Really, it's about being in an empathic environment. If people show that to us, then we're much more likely to learn how to be empathic towards somebody else and to how they feel. And what we know is that empathy really helps regulate difficult emotions for children. We know that we can talk to a child. We can say, I know you're really worried about grandma. Especially as we haven't been able to see her properly, and that must be really, really hard for you, and carrying that around, it must be really difficult for you to concentrate. We can kind of share some of those emotions in a very simple way for the child that just helps them again feel very listened and heard, and their feelings are really validated. I think one of the things that we've also talked about is reducing our own expectations of children, but also of ourselves, and to offer that very high nurture to our children again, but also to ourselves as well, that being kind to ourselves and talking to ourselves as if we would to a friend who's experiencing the same thing, really, and just acknowledging that we're all doing the best we can. The child's doing the best that they can, teaching staff are doing the best that they can, and as parents we're doing the best that we can as well for our children.
And again, that's modelling good resilience and building up that resiliency in our children, isn't it? If, like you say, if we can see adults being kind to themselves and understanding that we have good days and not so, and that we have wobbly days, it's good modelling for our children. I think we really wanted to put this in because it's so important when we were talking earlier about how children might present in different environments depending on their attachment needs and styles, and how they might be, whether they're in fight or flight mode when the amygdala, the smoke detector in the brain, is going and they're feeling really potentially very dysregulated. So we like the idea. Nock explored this recently in her webinar and paper, and we liked it because it looks at how often anger can be a real masking emotion for lots of other different feelings that might not be visible on the exterior, such as anxiety, nervousness, rejection, stress, grief, feeling flooded. So we thought that was just really important for teaching staff and adults to remember that what you see on the surface isn't always the full indicator of what may be going on beneath the surface for our children.
Yeah, it's a really good analogy for anything, really, isn't it?
Reminder, isn't it?
That's what we talked about, really. Thinking about those children that outwardly might show that they're coping very well, but actually underneath, a bit like a swan, they're pedaling away, and you don't really know what's really happening for them. So it's just that reminder of being mindful, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think this is just so powerful. We like this one. I think what Anne-Marie was really sharing there about self-care, and that's on all levels, as parents, as educators, that you need to be taking that nurture and resilience and that kindness to self and each other that we were talking about. And I know it's very easy for us to say that, but it's taking those moments, whether it's to talk to a friend, to have a debrief with your partner or a close friend or family member at the end of the day. You will need to have some time to take for yourselves in order to effectively support and apply PACE, as we're talking, on a daily basis. This is, it's 24/7. So that recognition of your caring and the need for you to nurture yourselves, really. And, it is so important that whether it's a cuppa and a chat or a bath or a chance to connect with someone and share if you've had a good or a difficult or challenging day, it's going to be really effective in giving you that chance to debrief from your day so that you can apply the PACE that we've been talking about together.